Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar, Industrial IoT Safety and Security, the Challenges, Regulations and Benefits. This is Aprajita Singh and I am the Marketing Executive for BSI. The industrial automation and control system sector is having great opportunities due to Industry 4.0 and Industrial IoT. Along with these possibilities come security risks. To avoid equipment damage, downtime, and safety concerns, industrial environments must be ready for growing cyber attacks. Through this webinar, our team of experts will guide you on the best practices used globally in emerging standards and regulations. What are the industrial security challenges and how can India market be ready? Before I start this webinar, I would like to lay some ground rules. You have joined this webinar in listen-only mode, but you are welcome to ask questions throughout the webinar using the question box. We will answer the questions in the quick Q&A session at the end, and any we don't get to will be answered after this webinar. We will be sharing the recording with you, and I will encourage all of you to participate in the upcoming polls to have your say, and please bear with us if there are any technical difficulties. We will fix those as soon as we can. Today, we have the honor to hear from our subject matter experts, David Mudd and Colonel Sunil Kapila. Let me introduce to our first speaker, David Mudd. He is responsible for BSI Digital Trust Assurance Solutions like training, testing, assessing, and certifying for ICT governance, risk management, cybersecurity and privacy, digital supply chain, data stewardship, and artificial intelligence. He supports BSI clients in the safe and the effective adoption of disruptive digital technologies and to build digital trust with their customers. Our second speaker of this webinar is Colonel Sunil Kapila. He's the subject matter expert in business resilience, data privacy, and protection. He specializes in the implementation of cybersecurity training programs. He is an expert in exploring new technologies and tinkering with emerging tech implementation of AI, ML, Internet of Things, and cloud. He carries over 35+ years of experience in cybercrime investigation, governance, resilience operation, risk management, threat intelligence with stints as Vice President of Engineering, Head Security Solution with brands like Tata, Advanced Systems, and Wipro Technologies. He has led multiple training for law enforcement agencies, including Narcotics Control Bureau, Director of Revenue Intelligence, Financial Intelligence Unit, and UNODC. I would like to hand over to David. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Aprajita. Hello, everybody. And really appreciate you all joining us today. And greetings as well, Colonel Kapila. It's always a pleasure to be working with you, speaking with you again. I'm looking forward to your usual challenging questions and excellent debate. So thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to be looking not just at IoT from the safety, security, and the practical aspects, but feedback we've had before around these webinars is very important that we don't lose track of the why as well as the how and the what. So I've really tried to strike a balance here between scene setting on what the issues are as well as detailed practical implementation, so we can really address the wide range of people and stakeholders we have in the audience today. So there's something in here for everybody, whether you are a deep domain expert in this or whether this is totally new to you. So please do add any questions you have as we go in the chat, and we'll do our best to address them as Aprajita has said. So what we're going to do today, a very quick introduction on IoT, BSI and IFF. So straight away a load of TLAs, good old three-letter acronyms coming in at the beginning here. And then we'll look at the important topic of IT, information technology and operational technology convergence and why this industrial IoT is so important. Something on the key challenges, an overview of emerging regulation, the most important relevant standards and best practice, and then focusing really how you as individuals, organizations, and within India can start to become future ready and really start to capitalize on the benefits of IoT. And then a bit really on how both BSI and IFF can help you on that journey. So really, let's just start with the rise of IoT. A lot of what I've been talking about over the last 6 or 7 years in particular, as things have massively accelerated since the start of the pandemic. A lot of the previous caution of adopting technologies through necessity from a business level and from quite often a regional government and national level, the need to adopt flexible, digital, remote ways of living and working has really driven the adoption of IoT very, very quickly. And what we've seen from that is, with everything that is positive in this, everything that technology that can be used for positive can be used for negative. And what we've seen alongside that massive surge in adoption of digital technologies has been the industrialization of cybercrime. So these two things together mean there's greater opportunity and also greater risk than ever. Then with industrial IoT, this is a much overused graphic, really showing what that industry 4.0 is. And I think it's really resonated with me over the years, the importance of that cyber physical, what that really means in terms of now the connectivity directly between the digital world into that physical world and the implications for that on all of us, particularly within the industrial IoT forum. So just throwing a few numbers at you. The vast majority of enterprises have now adopted some level of IoT. The number of devices, we've been saying for years it's going to be billions, and it is now 18 billion connected devices by the end of this year, IoT devices, that is specifically. 32 billion by 2025, and bam, that's another 127 just connected, just in that last second there. So that's the rate of adoption we're talking about. The global IoT market, pick a number, double it, and add some zeros. Yeah, it really is now starting to gain some traction. And then if we look into the value that industrial IoT is looking to add to the global economy, again, by the end of this decade, huge, huge numbers. And here in India, it's anticipated they will be at 2 billion IoT devices connected by the end of this year. However, a big number here, number one, the number one issue and concern remains security, as I've just mentioned. 1.5 billion attacks on IoT in just the first half of last year. It takes less than 5 minutes for you to connect an IoT device, it will be attacked. And so the whole of the IoT security market in itself is going to be of huge, huge value. So what does this all really say around IoT? Every business needs to address how IoT can help, and we'll come on to the particular benefits here of the particular implementations of IoT. Once you do connect, it will be attacked. Therefore, investment in IoT security is a real must. So just before we move on to this, Colonel Kapila, at this point, you've obviously been involved in the industry here from the outset. What are your thoughts on how things have really accelerated, both for good and bad, and what you see in India over the last couple of years? I think you're still on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Yeah, so I see, as you rightly said, in 5 minutes, we could potentially get attacked an IoT device which is visible. We are having threats now because of the vast connectivity. Remotely connected devices, what are called things, are permeated into a connectivity which is so accelerated and so far-reaching, when it is ubiquitous. So once that is there, and if the proper control isn't there, boundaries are not justified, so you are definitely very vulnerable for discovery, and with discovery, you are immediately find vulnerabilities there, where very mundane things like standard remote password not being there, or configurations not being there, or web services. Most of these intelligent devices have got intelligence built in, and they have a microservices parts which are reachable through the internet as we know it. This is how it's really expanding at a race. And one of the big challenges when I interact with the industry, be it the manufacturing or be it the big ticket pharma or chemical industries or gas and medical, is that they don't know where to approach the control and security stuff from. Many of them are still very wary, very apprehensive, and maybe rightly so, because they don't want their OT operations to get impacted in any way. If Aramco in Saudi Arabia, with so many controls and US experts and UK experts, giving them advisory, can get hit by cyber attacks, then they're a little apprehensive there. Then what would be if we make inroads into connecting IT to OT? So I think those concerns are very genuine. And so maybe when you take us through the thing, you can deliberately tell us how to approach in a cautious manner, step by step, so that we reach.
Absolutely, and it is interesting that even for me, when I've been talking about this for years now, but things like even things like passwords, that basic thing of default passwords, and we're still seeing those issues now. And that caution, well, that's exactly why a lot of you I know are here today. So let's move on really to look at the detail then of how you can actually approach these things in that suitably cautious and pragmatic manner. So basically, why are BSI the ones to speak to here? Well, firstly, though we've got British in the name, the majority of our clients, and indeed our own people, are outside of the UK, with 6 BSI offices across India. And standards, yes, we're the national standards body for the UK, a founding member of ISO, but also we actually then provide support around those standards as well. And the key point on this slide is that Royal Charter, which means we are independent of government, we are independent of shareholders, but we have a mandate to work for public good and to help organizations like yours adopt new technologies in a way that's safe, secure, sustainable, and bring a better world for us all. Digital trust, yeah, it's in my job title, it's a key focus for BSI. What does that really mean? The key areas for us, as we mentioned before, governance and risk, cybersecurity and privacy is right up there. And then digital supply chain, data stewardship, and AI. So IoT, as you can see, is front and center in terms of BSI's mission to bring digital trust to the world. And whether it's artificial intelligence, IoT certification, software trustworthiness, cybersecurity, testing of devices, training, consultancy, all these things fit within BSI's overall solutions to you. And when it comes to IoT and digital products and placing a mark of trust, some of the biggest names in the world, from Samsung, Xiaomi, Huawei, and then things like digital banking, digital security, messaging, all of these technologies and organizations have turned to BSI to help them build trust around their products. Colonel Kaplan, if I just ask you as well, just very briefly, just give an overview of what India Future Foundation is. And I know we're working very closely with IFF, how we move forward on IoT, but just from an IoT perspective, just a quick introduction on that as well.
Thank you, David. Well, India Future Foundation was established by my co-founder and friend Kanish Kaur. Unfortunately, he's not here; he's on a holiday, and that is why I'm kind of here alone. But we started this as an advocacy and a government cybersecurity foundation, where we are in touching with all the critical stakeholders within the government, within the industry, within the standard bodies, taking the best practices from organizations like BSI Grow, DMCS in the UK, and we do a number of such projects along with them, where we have at the last created awareness of IoT security standards from a consumer good. And we have also been participating along with them, giving monitoring, giving what are the kind of insights into new standards and in directions. The NCSC or the critical infrastructure folks are having. So that is one of the arms of India Future Foundation. Also, along with that, we have a parent coexisting technical services, the grounds, you can say, people, which are called as Indian Tech, which is actually based on these directions. Sometimes we are engaged through industry bodies like CIA. We're carrying out cybersecurity awareness, which is the presently session for last 1 year. I am personally doing on twice a week virtually, and also doing war gamings, doing interaction in all these things with the industry partners, be it from the automotive, be it critical infrastructure folks from government, manufacturing, or big gas and oil kind of collaborate.
Great. Yeah.
So that
really
is the kind of work we are doing. We have a young team where we carry out requirement capturing, we carry out advocacy, we bring some of the knowledge which we get through partners from BSI in the UK and others, and bring awareness deep into the requirements to begin with.
As I was saying, it's really, really good to see that you go not just from giving advice and guidance, but actually getting in there and doing it, and actually bring it to life, and working with government and industry. And it's been great working with IFF over the last couple of years on so many of these projects, albeit a very small contribution so far from us, but hopefully greater collaboration going forward.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. So let's get on to the heart of this. The first issue I just want to go through is the convergence of information technology, operational technology, and why this is really important when it comes to industrial IoT. A great graphic here from Gartner that really shows now taking that industry 4.0 and that talk of cyber physical, and there is now no longer a separation between your manufacturing assets, your business process, and your people. They're deeply interacting together and very, very strongly linked. And they also tend to have differing priorities. This is a bit of a generalization here, but if we look at us from and I say us here, coming to this mainly from a cybersecurity aspect, you tend to think of confidentiality as being the key priority here, protecting the intellectual property, protecting that data. Then integrity, making sure that data isn't tampered with, and then availability, that it's there when it's needed. If you take things from a classic operational technology perspective, they tend to be slightly different. At the top will actually be safety of the people. Then you have availability of that service to deliver the manufacturing requirement, and then protection really of the integrity of that information in order to protect the manufacturing, and then confidentiality tends to be at the bottom. So you tend to have not a conflict, but at least different priorities and approaches. We need to bring these together and have the best of both. And a really, really key point here, though it's quite a complex slide, the diagram on the right-hand side really shows that process flow from the initial planning and design of an IIoT project all the way through to its end of life. So the priority here is to take both the OT aspects and the IT aspects right from the outset, from the initial concept all the way through collaboratively, and consider that whole life rather than just looking at either any one particular issue. And both IT and OT need to be involved collaboratively in that specification, design, and consider end of life at the start of life. So there's quite a bit of information I won't go into now. I think I'll leave that really for you to have in the slides to follow up on. But for me now, that IT and OT convergence is absolutely critical, that they work together all the way through that product life cycle in order to make a successful project. So again, Colonel Kapila, if you've got any comments on that IT and OT, I know we've talked about this before. What are you seeing as the key points here around IT and OT?
Yeah, absolutely, David. Thank you. Absolutely, as you can see, the whole CI triad is not really inverted, but it's reprioritized, and safety being the top, because here we are talking about safety hazard standards, which are very, very essential and get embedded into things. And of course, OT, it's a 24/7 production house, plant, manufacturing, or what have you. it cannot be non-available. I mean, the whole purpose of CI or integrity or confidentiality would be lost if the systems were not available. So that is why the classic OT looked at it from a safety standpoint, because the hazard-proof standards are there. And availability becomes a very, very critical priority when we look at how to build up integrity and trust. The right word David used was called trust. I think we have to start looking at building up trust frameworks, especially in the IIoT OT field. That is how we look at. The one point I would say, there are already regulatory standards. Maybe I'll hold it if you are not covering that already, in a sense that what requires and where we can help, as you can say, foot soldiers working under the guidance of BSI, with David Mudd expertise being there, is that we can map the various I wouldn't say conflicting, but to various duplication of standards and certification and clauses and requirements, and create a good map from a IoT OT bridging standard with conventional regulatory standards, and what are the standards BSI as a standards body advocates. I think that we could thin out and give a little thinning layer, operational layer here, which will make it easy for practitioners who are listening to us to then have a very structured way of approaching solving these problems.
Well, that's a great comment, and that almost I don't want to jump right to the end here, but you've actually raised a really, really important point here that I will add now to essentially how we move forward. So we'll all hold that thought of what you're saying, Colonel Kapler, is there's a lot there. What the community probably needs is better guidance on a framework for which fits where and what's the appropriate fit. Really, really good point. Hold that thought, and we will come back to that later on. And now I just want to move on to the security challenge. This is the main issue why we want to discuss this today. So what's special about IoT? I think we're all reasonably familiar with the need for cybersecurity, with the need for firewalls, this kind of thing. What's special about IoT? Well, very briefly, with ICT, we've got a long history of security, and generally speaking, there is the budget in terms of physical space on the board, on the processor, power, bandwidth, memory, and to a certain extent, financial budget to commit to security. IoT, being a fast-moving emergent market, security by design, we've kind of lost that security by design, really hasn't really necessarily been embedded from the outset. Is there the physical space, processor power, memory, communications capacity, battery life to allow security to be built in? And if it isn't built in as a priority, it's damn expensive to put in afterwards. And the other key point here is many IoT manufacturers are the T, not the I. They're the manufacturers of things that put connectivity in there. So they're very, very heavily dependent on that supply chain for security. And how, as the end product manufacturer, can they be assured that embedded within the firmware somewhere, there's not a third-party plugin that's got some vulnerability, and how is that going to be managed, those vulnerabilities through the supply chain? So IoT itself becomes a very, very high-risk area for security for these reasons. And I've used this slide a lot, I continue to use it, just to reinforce these three big issues. Loss of control. I mean, that in the industrial IoT area is probably the biggest concern. When you're looking at consumer IoT, you might have got some smart home entertainment system, and you might be more bothered about the loss of, your loss of personal data. But loss of control of an IoT device, big issue. Theft or ransom of data, something that's increasing. It's hit the rest of the world, and I think it's coming to IoT very soon. I mentioned the industrialization of cybercrime. You can now buy ransomware as a service, just as you can buy any other service platform. And then the DDoS attack, made famous 6 years ago with the Mirai botnet, and resurged again last year with almost exactly the same technologies again. And rather disappointing to see that things like default passwords and very, very basic levels of security are still missing in so many IoT devices. So three big risks, but the biggest one still, I think, is this: it won't happen to me. Either my device is just a little widget, no one's interested in it, or, well, we use an accredited cloud provider and we use AES 256 encryption, we're good, aren't we? As we said before, you connect a device, it will be attacked, and there are many, many attack vectors there. So that awareness and real concern that there is a problem is still part of the biggest issue. And just took a quick look at some of the news over the last couple of months in India. And there was, okay, so it's an attack from a few years ago, but this was in the news again in August this year, again, where outdated policies, this is where it all starts with in an organization, your policies, and not just straight down to the technical controls, exposed a really serious potential risk at an Indian nuclear power plant. And then another incident here, which again shows the need, not just looking at technical controls, but individuals from one company then working with a competitor, then basically set up attack on an IoT firm. So again, needing to have levels of control throughout the whole of your organization, not just physical controls on the product. And then this very interesting article actually that talked about the whole range of cyber attacks going right the way across India's infrastructure. And as we've seen already, IoT is an extremely big, increasing and highly vulnerable attack surface and a key target for attackers now. So again, right here now within India, we are seeing an increasing level of attack, an increasing level of IoT adoption, but an increasing level of attack. And Colonel Kapila, goes back to your point of many organizations are now quite rightfully wary of moving forward here because of these risks. So at this point, Apajita, I'm just going to hand over to for a quick poll here, where we just want to understand, quite anonymously from you all, it's just open about your thoughts on where your organization stands now regarding cybersecurity in general and your business's preparedness. Apajita, over to you.
Thank you, David. So what do you think your business is sufficiently protected from the cyber threats? If you think yes, but it would like to understand more, then press the first option. And if your answer is no, then please press the second option.
So while we're just going through this poll, just a reminder, please put any questions you do have in the chat. And if we have time to answer them today, we will. If not, we will certainly follow up back with you as well. And we will get to the point, Colonel Kapila, where we have quite an open discussion today. I think it depends on the number of questions we get in, how much time. I know you and I could talk probably for 3 or 4 hours just on this subject. So I want to get as much time as possible to share some of your thoughts, and but still make sure we address any questions from the audience. So Apajita, how are we doing?
Yes. So 80% says yes, but would like to understand more, where 20% say no, we don't have enough.
Yeah.
Over to you, David.
It's an interesting one. So obviously, I think by the fact you're attending this call shows that you have an interest and have invested in cybersecurity protection. And I think one of the key things is that we do tend to think of it as protection. We maybe need to move away from that thought and think more about cyber resilience, because what we tend to think of is build a wall and we'll be okay. And this isn't about building a wall. This is about overall, and I think Colonel Kapila, with your military background, my military background as well, you know that it's not just about digging a trench into defense. It's all about intelligence up front, resilience through your organization, having the logistics in place, and not just looking at building that wall, identifying, building some protection, but then also detecting, looking at what is actually happening behind the scenes as well. Most big IoT, most big cyber attacks in general are not a smash and grab. They could be in there very subtly through in your wall into your system and sucking out information for months on end. So it's not just a case of building a wall, it's a case of identifying the threats, current and future, putting some protection in place, but also looking to detect, respond and recover when you do have an incident as well. But we'll come on to more of that in a moment. What I want to start to get on now is let's look at the good things. And let's start to look at what's actually out there now to support you before we open up the discussion here. When it comes to regulation, particularly around industrial or the IoT in general, IoT devices, the European Union is really leading the way here with the radio equipment directive. So, okay, it only applies to devices which have some kind of connectivity. It could be Wi-Fi, it could be Bluetooth, but that's the vast majority. Any product going into the EU is subject to the radio equipment directive, now has to consider cybersecurity. And the directive points to a specific standard for consumer IoT, which is the ETSI EN 303645, and a particular standard for industrial as well. So this is the EU radio equipment directive focused on products, and this focus on the product standard within the IEC 62443 Industrial Control System Security Standard. So very, very clear pointer there into where you need to look to comply with cybersecurity for any device that has some kind of radio equipment connectivity. It will be mandatory for all products being placed on the market in the EU from August 2024, and it's already being phased in at the moment. Other regulation focusing purely on IoT within the UK, it's consumer IoT only and relatively limited in scope. California, it refers to all IoT, but again, it's very limited in scope. In the USA, there is an IoT improvement law, but it's guidance and recommendations. It's non-mandatory. And this is effectively the way that we're seeing outside of EU, UK, and California. Most other policies are more around guidance and recommendations and are voluntary. And if we're looking at India, again, I'll come over to you again, Colonel Kapila. Again, from what I've seen, they're really taking that same trend, focusing initially on consumer IoT, and largely speaking, it's more about this is best practice rather than anything mandatory at this stage. Is that what you're seeing from your dealings with NCSC, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have had a IoT security, consumer IoT labeling standard out from the government perspective, and consumers are being encouraged to ensure that some kind of a marking and labeling standardization awareness is spreading it. But again, they have taken their cut from the let's do the easy thing first, which is the consumer IT part of it. And sadly, I mean, I don't know, it's not, this is my view, maybe wrong, David, you can come and correct, but most are, because of the largeness of the exercise, but the criticality and the seriousness of industrial IoT is, according to me, more important. And whenever I have in interaction with these bodies said, he says, yeah, that's tall order, lots to be done. And first, let's do a consumer awareness part of it first. So for last 2-3 years, sadly, given that I have white hair and aging age, I wanted to get my hands a little dirty, getting more into the IoT part of it, the industrialization part of it. The only thing I could do was to get a data diode POC going somewhere through some force of effort. But there is a largeness fear of touching the OT part, without enough landscape, enough regulation, awareness there. So I think maybe they are justified because it's a very important thing. So maybe I feel from the regulatory perspective, given your direction, we should, according to me, we should have more focus, impetus on simulators, testing grades through awareness. Verbal, dry, regulatory in books, codified, are having, of course, great knowledge base, but not enough. But really practitioners on the field, and I'm very sure about 85 of them are listening to us today. So many of them would have already been a very advanced stage of manufacturing or handling these operations, would want certain more testing harnesses, simulators, seeing what can go wrong and how wargaming, what do you call it, simulation. I don't think in our landscape in India, enough of that has been done. Yes, there are simulators available which are product specific, but we have to come from a regulatory and a standard body perspective and not from OEMs like Siemens person or any power CERC or NERC product equipment provider.
Yeah, I'd like to just pick up on that point. I think that's an important point. Going back one step, first of all, the one area where we are seeing a little bit more regulation, as you and I discussed, is more around at the top level for critical infrastructure, including healthcare. So there is regulation around that area. Below that, there isn't. And there are lots of reasons for that. You know, regulation isn't the only way forward here. It can, if it's not applied correctly and not enforced correctly, it can actually do more damage than good. It's very difficult when a lot of the products coming in are coming in from outside of the jurisdiction of the regulation as well. So there are many issues with that. I think, as you said, Colonel Kapila, we've got to find a practical way forward. And generally speaking, that's about encouraging best practice. And we'll come on to what's needed for that. And I suppose from my perspective, I focus more on the guidance and the help. But I think what you're saying around practical tools and support on the ground, that's something else maybe we'll come on to a bit later on in discussion when we look at the future next steps. So thank you, a really good point. When we're looking at standards,
just a moment.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes.
I just wanted to add a thing I missed out. So I make exactly the same point with the authority that NSSC, the National Cyber Security Agency, you know, you were Colonel Pant and that people. And we had the discussion. As you know, IFF is leading the CRK initiative for CI industry body, where we're spreading for SME thing, you know, hygiene level cybersecurity world, which also touches manufacturing, pharma, medical, and all that. And then I said, so we're done in this for 8-9 years, and a very good, fantastic response we are getting. Why not let's now start going for the critical infrastructure? And then he says, yeah, we know that's the big one, but let's first do this. Lots to be done still in the SME field stuff. So we have to find a way of get that kick started. Maybe like the initiative CI did, maybe BSI can, you know, lead that kind of initiative, which we can help to spread more awareness of the critical infrastructure challenges, use cases, and how to go about you know, protecting ourselves from these people also, because 80% said that they are pretty well done. I'm very sure, if I'm not wrong, it will be coming from the product OEM standpoint. You know,
yeah, I think because one of the,
we have to deploy products, so we go by something, but for want of any industrial IoT standard framework to test benchmark it, how do you really be certain that what you have done till now, what the OEM is doing, is really you know, really trustworthy, or what level of trust you can put on that?
okay, again, I think that's something that our organizations collaboratively can certainly move forward on. And it's a good point. Again, though there is regulation around the critical infrastructure and healthcare, what I've seen is it's kind of top level. That basically says you've got to do a risk assessment and then you've got to mitigate the risks, rather than prescribing the detail of what sits beneath it. So I think that on a practical terms, what does it really look like is really what you're saying here. I think that's what, again, we can really drive forward. So that's a really good point. To help with that, there are actually some really good tools that are freely available for everybody. One great set has come out from NIST in the USA, the 8259 series. So that's foundational activities, not just a spec, a whole load of activities that a manufacturer should conduct. And then a baseline technical spec and a baseline non-technical spec. And I'll come on to those, what they mean. And then also something around creating a security profile. And then finally one that's more dedicated to the US government. But those top four, the foundational activities, the baseline, both technical and non-technical, and the security profiling, are beneficial to everybody. They're totally free and they're available in very, very easy to understand. So very briefly, the technical and non-technical baseline covers the basics around defense, device ID, configuration, protecting data, software updates, access, and then just monitoring the cybersecurity state. But very, very important, they've also included the non-technical baseline, the documentation level. And probably the most important thing, almost hidden here, is information and query reception. By that, you're also looking at things like responsible vulnerability disclosure? How do you engage with ethical hackers and make sure that they are an asset for your business, not a threat? Disseminating information, education, and awareness. All that is laid out in plain English, some basic guidelines that any manufacturer could adopt today. And the guidance goes through the whole of that life cycle. It doesn't just say this is how you design a product. It's saying about identifying the environment in which the product's going to be used, the client expectations, and then looking at what's the suitable cybersecurity profile for that particular use case, and then planning for that. But going beyond that into that market access phase, once the product's out there, how do you then still continue to engage and ensure that your product has the appropriate security profile, which will evolve over time for that particular use case? All this guidance in simple plain English is there, freely available now. So it's not some detailed, complicated technical spec that you can't understand. You've got 6 technical controls, a bunch of very basic non-technical controls, and some guidance through the life cycle. What could be more straightforward? However, though, there are the detailed technical spec that to a certain extent will address some of Colonel Capela's points. The IEC 62443 series, Security for Industrial Automation and Control Systems, globally accepted, and it covers all the stakeholder groups. There's guidance in there for manufacturers, for integrators, for users, maintainers, and owners. And this is global, international best practice that its potential had to be assessed for conformance. So this looks a little confusing, but it's actually reasonably straightforward. The standard is at 4 levels, and there are things here that cover asset owners, very, very specific. If you look at 62443-2-2, implementation and guidance for the asset owners. At the other end, you've also got technical security requirements for control system components, which is the element that goes into the EU Radio Equipment Directive. And then between that, you've got installation, maintenance, patch management, security technologies. There are so many different elements here, but all in one overall portfolio of targeted standards covering asset owners, users, service providers, integrators, and product suppliers. So a very, very useful framework here that's international best practice that becomes a passport for building trust, as you said, Colonel Capela, very, very important point, and we'll be coming back to that again. So at this point, I just want to go through a quick poll here. From that brief flash of, there's IEC 62443, Apajita, if you wouldn't mind sharing the next poll, what do people think in terms of how this applies to them?
Sure, David. So where are you regarding the industrial cybersecurity and this suite of standards? So if you're new to this and you want to learn more, kindly press option number 1. If you are implementing a stage, then option number 2 is for you. And if you are familiar but not certified, then you can press option number 3. If you're certified but need to learn more about the current issue, then you can go for option number 4. And if it's not relevant to your business, then the last option is for you.
Thank you. Any questions, please do put them in the chat while we're just waiting. I can see we're running a little behind on time, so as soon as we're done here, we're going to get really stuck into, I think, just pulling out what it means going forward on this, so we can then still have chance for answering any questions that you have. So Apajita, how are we doing on responses? And
yes, David. So 74% people say I need to learn more about it, and 7% are in the implementation stage, and 12% say they are familiar but not certified, and rest of says it's not relevant to my business. Over to you, David.
Okay, so that's interesting. I think there's probably more people engaged with it than I anticipated, which is great news. And I think this is something where, as we come on to next actions and steps forward, those of you in particular who are already engaged with this very important suite of standards for industrial IoT will be wanting to hear more from you. So at this point then, we will march on And the final bit I want to introduce, after going through regulations and standards, is some really, really good best practice guides. So this, again, this comes from the IoT Security Foundation, a global not-for-profit organization really focusing on bringing up the level of best practice for IoT security globally. And it really focuses on security by design, which, as I've already mentioned, if you haven't designed it in, it's very, very difficult to add on afterwards. And what's called the Quad A set of, so it's available, it's accessible, it's authoritative, and it's actionable. Many of the world's experts have fed into this. I don't want to call myself a world expert, but I certainly spent a lot of time with the IoT Security Foundation and helping them look at guidance that isn't just actionable, but then also is something to help build trust and can demonstrate conformance with at the outset as well. So a really, really good set of best practice, and it's totally free. It's there available right now for any manufacturer or for any user to be able to see what good looks like.
Hello, sir.
So looking really.
Sorry to interrupt you, David.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, David. Your slide is not visible right now.
Okay, I will just try stopping sharing and sharing again.
Sure.
So can you see?
Yes.
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 Now?
Please carry on.
Okay, apologies for that. So here we go. I've talked about this already. The IoT Security Foundation has a series of best practice guides, totally free, available, and a real must read for any manufacturer, an integrator, and any user who wants to understand what good looks like and the questions and challenges they should be putting to their suppliers. This is the place to look. So just want to move on now to becoming future ready. So we've seen that regulation is emerging, evolving, starting with a soft touch, but more is coming. So what does future ready mean? Does it mean about being compliant with legal regulations? Well, yes, but I think they will always lag behind the real issue of looking after your business, looking after your clients, looking after those that you do business with. And that surely means some level of embedding security as a principle. But for me, I think it's more than that. It's making sure security is a key element of the product, just as important as functionality. So alongside specifying the functional requirements right from the outset, specification, design development, verification, validation, outsourcing, procurement, manufacturing, support, and maintenance throughout life, security is incredibly important and needs to be just side by side with functionality. And not just looking at current, but looking at future threats and needs as well. So that identify, I said, as well as protect, detect, etc., needs to be horizon scanning for what's coming. So there's a lot of work to be future ready and make you, your products, your organizations future ready. But we also need to look at the benefits. If there was no benefits in doing that, why would we actually do this? So you can look at it from a risk management perspective. This is protecting your brand, your reputation, and it's obviously the technical protection of your product, commercial protection of your business, legal, and then financial implications. I mean, in the EU, the fines, particularly if there's anything involving personal data, can be astronomical. So there's lots of reasons here, but we don't want this to be a do this or you're going to get hacked. Invest this money and effort on security, and something bad might not happen. This is really around differentiation, and as Colonel Capella pointed out earlier, building trust. And that is so important from a BSI perspective. Digital trust takes you beyond just conforming here. From the World Economic Forum, digital trust, the currency that facilitates future innovation and prosperity. So at a societal level, at an industry level, at a business level, and at a personal level, digital trust is so important to us all for the future. Protecting business, people, your customers, your investors, your shareholders, your value chain, and security is certainly absolutely the heart of that. So when you're looking at going forward with this, starting with the why, don't just focus on we've got to do this to protect ourselves. We've got to do this so we are playing in that future digital world, playing to our strengths and enabling our business to succeed and prosper. So this isn't just around, oh, I've got to do this so we don't get hacked. This is really about putting that positive approach. So when we're looking at future ready, and Colonel Kapler, I'm going to bring you in on this as well. When we looked at where to start, for me, there's a lot of free available best practice from NIST, advice and guidelines from IoT Security Foundation that don't just focus on the technical controls. They need to look at what you need as an organization, and they also guide you through the whole process of how you engage with your potential market as well. So, Colonel Kapler, from your perspective, it sounds like, okay, this is all good from the guidance, but you're also then looking for more collaboration and practical on the ground, let's hear, test it, do it, and take these concepts and bring them to life.
Yes, for example, these on both sides of the technical baseline as well as the non-technical baseline, fantastic material there. I totally agree with you. But we have to apply to the context of the environment in which it's got to be applied, and that's where the differentiation happens. And that is why sometimes the practitioners or the SMEs on the ground kind of struggle as to, okay, fine, this I understand, but how do I apply it? I do remember when with BSI we were doing the GDPR and all those other things. A lot of good practices with privacy by design and stuff like that. He said, this is all fine English language, but how do I apply it to my domain? This is my problem. I can't close all this. I have to continue to doing function. And how do I dovetail that into it? And I think that's a critical area. That's where collaborative work, like we saw in the poll last time, that there are some people who already ahead in trying to implement these standards, as they said. Maybe we can pick some of them, have a discussion with them, and collaboratively go forward and spreading big awareness, creating more insights, sharing the experience without violating any copyright or any so-called.
I'm smiling while you're saying this.
I think that goes a long way. That makes the subject alive. Otherwise, these documents are already there. People will say, so what is the great thing, David, IFF, and you guys are going to do? These documents are there for everybody to read. It's question of relating them, translating them into realities and artifacts, which are more meaningful to the enterprise whose business is not to build standards, but to ensure that they are future ready.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling with this because you kind of, and honestly to the audience, kind of Kapler has not seen my slides in advance and doesn't know what we're going to come on to next, but I'm loving what you just said there because that really sets us up. So we can see there's some good guidance there. As Colonel Kapler says, what we need is more collaboration around the real world and bringing it to life. And I'll move on from this slide that basically, again, talks about bringing the IT and OT together. Now, at BSI, I've mentioned this before, who we're working with already, but the next slide I wanted to bring into was this one. So a key part, a difference that BSI really brings is what we call convening the ecosystem. So bringing everyone together and saying, look, here's the standards, here's the guidance. What does it look like with you guys who are living with this day to day? And what's needed then to shape something? It could be a framework, it could be a test program, a solution, whatever that is, to drive forward and actually make things happen. We're doing this right now, for instance, with digital healthcare. We've got a great program there where we are bringing consumer wearables into the healthcare environment in a way that's safe, secure, and compliant with regulation. We're doing it with cryptographic modules in another area. And what we are proposing right now is within India, we aim to do the same thing for industrial IoT. So exactly as you say, Colonel Kapler, and this quite seriously, everybody, this wasn't a setup. This is exactly what BSI is proposing to do. And I'm sure our collaboration with IFF will be a key part of this. So one of the big asks for us is, any of you who are involved right now working with, in particular, IEC 62443 and those frameworks, you're working with it already. We're looking to bring together a community within India under what we call Chatham House rules. So free and open discussion, but nothing attributed to any individual, and work out the real life use cases, what's really needed to help build trust and make this happen. So that our call to action here is really going to be any of you who are involved already and want to help drive this forward and really get some benefit from your commitment to security. In collaboration with IFF, BSI will be moving this forward. So if there's any way at all that we can help, what Colonel Kapler has just said, on top of BSI's standard solutions that we can offer around assessing and certifying, verifying, right now, our #1 focus in India for industrial IoT is getting the community together. Let's look at some of these specific use cases, drive it forward, make something happen, and actually start building trust. And our main man for IoT in India, Gaurav, who I know is out there listening in today, is our main contact here, who is working in the background on this and looking to make it happen. So I can see we are.
Can I just step in? Yeah,
Sorry.
I just wanted to add, I wanted to draw from the experience IFF and we had with another third party, Microsoft, with CI Industry Forum in India, where we are running this what is called Cyber Raksha Kavach awareness program for the SMEs. And along with that, we are also running what is called, of course, supported by Microsoft and others, because we have to put a lot of effort and time in creating content and delivering it. But it goes to the consumer, the stakeholders, almost free of cost. So to encourage them to engage, 3 days time, non-intrusive, very mundane. We'll let you know where your the top 10 weaknesses are in your enterprise. And we did a great job. My team did a great job of things. It gave a very positive respect, and people were very appreciated. Some 50 odd companies volunteered to get their infrastructure being assessed by my team, and we gave it through the body. Like in this case, it could be BSI, mandated by them, and so that people say, then they started seeing value in what we were doing, and then they said, hey, we want a larger reach, we want more detailed stuff and all that. So I think that kind of speeds up the momentum, the climate. Otherwise, people are working in silos. And one important question I had related to this was critical infrastructure you mentioned in the slide, right? You highlighted it in the third or fourth slide, rightly so. Especially for system integrators, of course, the standard is there, which handles between system integrators, manufacturers, and operators, right? Or plant operators on the supply chain. What about managing the critical supply chain? Because that's one thing from a cyber resilience and cyber security standpoint is also very valid for IoT industrial security, because we have found studies where most of the critical embedded devices imported, proprietary, brought into the system is where the threats happened, where the attacks happened from.
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah, digital supply chain we see is the biggest risk area right now. Like I said, IoT in particular, because everybody is dependent on that supply chain. We're running out of time on that, but that will be one of the key themes for the community. We have some solutions in place already for that we want to test with the community. So I'm very quickly going to summarize. We've talked through today IoT, the massive increase in both opportunity but in risk. There is best practice out there that is available. A lot of it is free. We will be sending, as part of the follow-up with this, information to link you to those free best practice guides, along with some white papers and other content that we've already created. And on the final poll that Apogita will put up there as the event finishes, we'll be asking where you are on your journey. And one of those options will be, if you're already working with the 62443 or something similar in industrial IoT, become part of the solution. Join us, join BSI, join IFF, and make this happen for India. So on that note, apologies we've gone slightly over. We haven't had a chance to answer your questions, but we will pick them up and come back to you. But really, really good to see you again, Colonel Kapler, and thank you so much for sharing your insight today as well. So thank you to all for listening. Please. Thank you. Please get involved. Apogita, over to you.
Yes, thank you, David. So can I request our audience to kindly choose one of the options given on your screen if you like to be contacted by BSI representatives for any of the following requirements, like for a better understanding of the standard, if like the world is moving towards the standard, and Can BSI help me in this standard? And what are the benefits from partnering with BSI? If you would like to choose one of the options, we can help you with the requirements.
Okay. So
Yeah. Thank you for this question. And since we are over the time, I would like to tell all the participants that we will be answering all of your questions. We got a couple of questions in this webinar. We will definitely answer all the questions after this webinar to you. And I would like to close this webinar. Thank you for everyone for attending this today's webinar. And I'm sure our audiences enjoyed this insightful session as much as I did. Thank you to our speakers. And all the participants will receive this link of the recording of this webinar. And in order to get this great content, you must complete the post survey questionnaire that will pop up as soon as you end this webinar. If you have any questions regarding this session, please indicate that on the survey and we will get back to you right away. And once again, thank you all for attending this webinar and have a great day ahead. Thank you to our speakers as well.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.